Možeš biti snažan, svjestan, empatičan, a ipak se gubiti u sebi, a da to ne shvaćaš. Možda tvoj umor ne proizlazi iz svijeta, već iz uloge koju si naučio igrati u njemu. U ovom videu otkrit ćete zašto pretjerana empatija može postati tihi zatvor, kako konstruira identitete koji nas udaljavaju od nas samih i što se događa kada se ta persona počne raspadati. Inspiriran filozofijom Alana Wattsa i dubinskom psihologijom, ovo nije video za zabavu. To je poziv da vidite nešto što ste možda dugo izbjegavali. Pitanje je jednostavno, ali snažno. U kojem trenutku svog života ste počeli napuštati sebe kako biste se uklopili s drugima? Kad empat počne tiho nestajati, u prvih nekoliko sekundi nitko to ne primjećuje, čak ni on sam. Empat se i dalje smiješi, sluša, pomaže, odgovara na poruke kasno noću, prisutan je kada su svi ostali odsutni, ali nešto bitno se već počelo miješati u njemu. To nije oštra bol, nije vidljivi kolaps. To je tiho, gotovo elegantno pomicanje, kao da je sama duša naučila tiho se iskliznuti, kako ne bi smetala. Alan Watts je znao objašnjavati da se ljudska bića ne rađaju s fiksnim ja, već uče vidjeti sebe kroz uloge koje igraju. Empati, više od bilo koje druge vrste osobe, to uče vrlo rano. Oni percipiraju emocionalnu klimu okoline čak i prije nego što shvate što se govori. Primjećuju napetosti, tugu, očekivanja. Uče prilagoditi svoju prisutnost kako bi olakšali teret drugima, ne zato što ih je netko zamolio, već zato što to osjećaju, a osjećati se za njih oduvijek činilo kao odgovornost. U djetinjstvu empati se uglavnom nisu učili ignorirati tuđu bol. Naprotiv, hvalili su ih zbog zrelosti, razumijevanja i smirenosti. Dok su druga djeca izražavala ljutnju ili frustraciju, oni su je naučili obuzdavati. Promatrali su odrasle, razumjeli njihove šutnje i prilagođavali se. Nesvjesno su počeli povezivati ljubav s emocionalnom korisnošću. Biti potreban postao je sinonim za biti prihvaćen. S vremenom se to pretvara u gotovo nevidljiv obrazac. Empat odrasta vjerujući da njegova vrijednost leži u njegovoj sposobnosti da podrži druge. Slušaju ponavljajuće priče, upijaju tjeskobe koje nisu njihove, nose sukobe koje nisu stvorili. I sve to čine s impresivnom prirodnošću. Izvana se čine jakima. Iznutra se prilagođavaju potrebama drugih. Alan Watts je rekao da problem nije u igranju uloga, već u zaboravljanju da su to samo uloge. Empat ne shvaća kada prijeđe tu granicu. Ne osjeća točan trenutak kada prestaje pomagati izborom i počinje pomagati iz obveze. Prijelaz je spor, gotovo neprimjetan. Jednog dana shvate da izgovaranje ne izaziva krivnju, da distanciranje stvara tjeskobu, da razmišljanje o sebi zvuči kao sebičnost. Ipak on nastavlja dalje. Uvijek nastavlja dalje. Postoji nešto neobično u načinu na koji empati pati. Ne eksplodiraju, ne dramatiziraju, ne privlače pozornost na sebe. Njihova bol je organizirana, tiha, funkcionalna. Nastavljaju raditi, povezivati se, živjeti, ali počinju osjećati umor koji ne nestaje s odmorom. Težina koja nema imena. Čudna želja da nestanu na nekoliko sati, nekoliko dana, možda na neodređeno vrijeme. U društvenim okupljanjima smiješi se dok želi otići. U dubokim razgovorima nudi savjete, ignorirajući vlastita unutarnja pitanja. U romantičnim vezama razumije sve, prihvaća gotovo sve i uvijek se prilagođava. I malo po malo gubi pojam o tome gdje druga osoba završava, a gdje on sam počinje. Wattso je objasnio da ono što se stalno potiskuje ne nestaje, već se manifestira samo na neizravne načine. Kod empata se to pojavljuje kao kronična emocionalna iscrpljenost. Počinju se iritirati zbog sitnica i ne razumiju zašto. Osjećaju difuznu nelagodu kada prime poruke u kojima se traži pomoć. U sebi se pitaju, zašto sam umoran ako se ništa loše nije dogodilo? Ništa loše zapravo. Ništa loše s vanjske strane. Ali iznutra nešto bitno je godinama zanemareno. Empat počinje shvaćati da uvijek ima mjesta za patnju drugih, ali nikada za vlastitu. Kada pokušaju razgovarati o sebi, mijenjaju temu. Kada im se plače, racionaliziraju. Kada ih nešto boli, opravdavaju tuđe ponašanje. Postali su stručnjaci u razumijevanju, ali šegrti u osjećanju vlastite boli. U njemu postoji stalni mikrosukob. Ako prestane, tko će biti? Ako prestane emocionalno podržavati druge, hoće li i dalje biti voljen? Ta se pitanja ne pojavljuju jasno. Pojavljuju se kao nelagoda, kao bezoblični nemir, kao osjećaj da nešto nije na svom mjestu. Ali nije jasno točno što. Alan Watts često je govorio o igri sebe, tom neumoljivom pokušaju održavanja koherentnog identiteta u očima svijeta. Empat igra ovu igru vrlo dobro, možda i previše dobro. Postaje pouzdan prijatelj, razumljiv partner, uravnotežen kolega. I što je persona dosljednija, to je dalje od vlastitog unutarnjeg iskustva. Postoje trenuci kada gotovo primijeti dulja tišina na kraju dana, izgubljeni pogled u ogledalo, prolazna misao, kada me je zadnji put netko pitao kako sam zapravo. Ali brzo prođe. Uvijek postoji netko u potrebi. Uvijek je vanjska hitnost veća od unutarnje. Tijelo počinje slati signale. Neobjašnjivi bolovi, stalna napetost, teškoće s opuštanjem. Empat ih ignorira. Naučili su ih ignorirati. Obučeni su za to. Obučeni su da daju prioritet ravnoteži svoje okoline, čak i ako ih to košta njih samih. Wattso je rekao da ljudska bića ne pate zato što previše osjećaju, već zato što pokušavaju kontrolirati ono što osjećaju. Empati pokušavaju kontrolirati sve. Svoju osjetljivost, umor, frustraciju. Oni se kontroliraju kako ne bi djelovali negativno, nezahvalno ili slabo. I tako se distanciraju od vlastite spontanosti. Najparadoksalnije je to što ga nitko ne prisiljava. Empat se rijetko eksplicitno iskorištava. On se nudi. Predviđa potrebe, popunjava emocionalne praznine, izbjegava sukobe. Vjeruje da ako sve napravi kako treba, konačno će doći do odmora. Konačno će biti viđen. Konačno će netko primijetiti njegov tihi trud. Ali to se gotovo nikad ne događa. I onda se nešto promijeni. Ne dramatično. Ne s velikim gubitkom ili traumatičnim događajem. Mijenja se u detalju. U noći kada osjeti neočekivani otpor prema još jednom izljevu osjećaja. U trenutku kada shvatiš da nekome savjetuješ o granicama dok ih sam nemaš. U neugodnom osjećaju življenja života na autopilotu. Alan Watts bi to nazvao početkom svjesnosti. Trenutak kada se obrazac počinje vidjeti, čak i ako se ne razumije. Empat ne zna što učiniti s tom percepcijom. To ga plaši. Ako je bolje pogleda, možda će se morati promijeniti. Možda će morati nekoga razočarati. Možda će morati razočarati samog sebe. Zato pokušava nastaviti kao i prije. Ali nešto je već dotaknuto. A ono što je dotaknuto savješću ne vraća se na spavanje na isti način. Počinje se pitati, iako plaho, nije li se njegova empatija pretvorila u samozanemarivanje? Nije li njegova ljubaznost postala sofisticirani način bijega od samoga sebe? Ta pitanja ostaju bez odgovora. Ona jednostavno lebde, odjekuju u pozadini, povećavajući unutarnju težinu. Empat to još ne zna, ali je na rubu nečeg nepovratnog. Ne vanjskog kolapsa, već duboke unutarnje promjene. Nečega što se ne može poništiti s više razumijevanja, više strpljenja ili više tišine. Jer, po prvi put, javlja se novi osjećaj. To nije tuga, to nije ljutnja, to je egzistencijalni umor. Umor od stalnog igranja iste uloge. Zbunjena želja da više ne treba biti jak, dostupan, uravnotežen. I jedne obične noći, bez ceremonije ili upozorenja, shvaća nešto što mijenja sve. Možda najveća patnja u njegovom životu nije došla od drugih, već od toga koliko je naučio nestati kako bi se uklopio u njihove živote. Odakle gledaš ovaj video? Kada se empat počne povlačiti iz svijeta od samog početka, nešto se mijenja gotovo neprimjetno, ali definitivno. Empat se budi i shvaća da tišina više nije samo odmor, već nužnost. Nema jasne tuge, nema očite ljutnje. Postoji čudan osjećaj zasićenosti, kao da svijet govori preglasno i po prvi put nemaju energije da sve to prevedu u brigu. Ovaj početni trenutak ne dolazi s dramom, dolazi s lucidnošću, neugodnom lucidnošću, Alan Watts je objasnio da ljudski pati kada nastavlja ponavljati stare obrasce čak i nakon što su izgubili svoje značenje. Empat počinje osjećati upravo to. On i dalje odgovara na poruke, i dalje sluša, i dalje savjetuje, ali nešto u njemu više ne prati gestu. Kao da je tijelo prisutno, a svijest je napravila korak unatrag. Ta odvojenost nije vidljiva drugima. Izvana se sve čini normalnim. Iznutra, empat počinje shvaćati koliko dugo živi u stalnom stanju emocionalne budnosti. Uvijek je znao kada netko treba progovoriti, kada pogrešna riječ može povrijediti, kada je bolje šutjeti. Sada ga ta sposobnost počinje opterećivati. Ne zato što je prestala postojati, već zato što je postala iscrpljujuća. Postoji tihi sukob koji raste iz dana u dan. Empat osjeća potrebu za povlačenjem, ali odmah se javlja krivnja. Ako nisu dostupni, netko se može osjećati napušteno. Ako ne reagiraju, mogu razočarati. Ta krivnja ne proizlazi iz vanjskog pravila. Dolazi iz identiteta izgrađenog tijekom života. Oni nisu samo empatična osoba. Oni su empat. I napuštanje ove uloge na trenutak se čini kao napuštanje onoga što jesu. Alan Watts je rekao da psihološka patnja nastaje kada pomiješamo funkciju sa suštinom. Empati se nikada nisu pitali tko bi bili bez svoje emocionalne funkcije. Sada se to pitanje počinje pojavljivati nehotice. Zamišljaju kakav bi bio život u kojem ne bi morali stalno biti pažljivi na emocionalno stanje drugih. Ideja je istovremeno zastrašujuća i olakšavajuća. Tijelo reagira prije uma. Postoji sve veća želja za samoćom. Društveni pozivi počinju se činiti nametljivima. Dugi razgovori postaju zamorni. Empat počinje birati tišinu ne kao bijeg, već kao samoodržanje. Ipak preispituje se, je li to sebičnost ili preživljavanje. U kratkim trenucima osjeti nešto uznemirujuće. Kad ode, nitko ne pita zašto. Kad ušuti, svijet ide dalje. To stvara mješavinu olakšanja i boli. Olakšanje što se napokon može odmoriti. Bol što shvaća da možda njegova stalna prisutnost nikada nije bila toliko neophodna koliko je zamišljao. Watts je rekao da ego pati jer želi biti potreban, želi biti centralan. Empat počinje to vidjeti u sebi. Ne na optužujući način, već iskreno. Shvaća da je dio njegove iscrpljenosti proizašao iz nesvjesne potrebe, da bude emocionalno važan, da bude onaj koji sve razumije, koji sve održava. Ova spoznaja ga ne čini gorim, ali ga ostavlja golim pred samim sobom. Empat počinje promatrati njihove odnose s većom distancom. Primjećuje obrasce koji su prije bili nezapaženi, ljude koji se pojavljuju samo kada im nešto treba, razgovore koji nikada ne zalaze dublje kada su oni sami tema, neravnopravnu razmjenu koja je oduvijek bila normalizirana. To ne stvara mržnju, već iscrpljenost, duboku, egzistencijalnu iscrpljenost. Tada nastaje stalni mikrosukob. Ako postavi granice, tko će ostati? Ako prestane pružati emocionalnu podršku, hoće li veza ostati? Ta se pitanja ne postavljaju naglas. Manifestiraju se kao unutarnja napetost, poput čvora u prsima kad pomisli reći ne. Alan Watts je rekao da svjesnost boli prije nego što oslobodi. Empat osjeća tu bol. To nije dramatična bol, to je trajna nelagoda. Počinje shvaćati da je njegova empatija dugo vremena bila automatski mehanizam, a ne svjesni izbor. A ono što je automatsko može postati zatvor. Ponekad se pokušava vratiti starim navikama. Prisiljava na razgovore, nudi pomoć, pokušava osjetiti to staro zadovoljstvo. Ali nešto mu više ne odgovara. To je kao da pokušava nositi odjeću koja mu više ne odgovara. Gesta se dogodi, ali veza ne. Ovaj proces stvara čudnu prazninu. Ako više nije emocionalni spasitelj, što ostaje? Empat se suočava s unutarnjim prostorom koji nikada nije istražio. Prostorom u kojem nema vanjskih hitnosti, samo neodgovorena pitanja. Tko sam ja kada mi nije stalo do nekoga? Što osjećam kada ne upijam osjećaje drugih? Wattso je objasnio da je praznina zastrašujuća, jer smo naučeni da je odmah ispunimo. Empat osjeća taj impuls, želju da se vrati svojoj staroj ulozi, da se odvrati, da se emocionalno poveže s drugima, ali nešto ih spriječava. Novi unutarnji otpor, još uvijek krhak ali stvaran. Tišina počinje otkrivati stvari koje je godinama izbjegavao. Stare frustracije, nepriznate ogorčenosti, želje koje nikada nije izrazio. Shvaća da je toliko vremena proveo razumijevajući druge, da si nije dopustio da razumije samog sebe. To shvaćanje ne dolazi s odgovorima, dolazi s još više pitanja. Ima noći kada osjeća drugačiju vrstu usamljenosti. To nije usamljenost samoće, to je usamljenost prvog susreta sa samim sobom. To ga uznemiruje. Istovremeno, postoji čudan osjećaj iskrenosti. Ništa za što bi se mogao uhvatiti, ništa za uravnotežiti, ništa za riješiti. Empat počinje shvaćati da se njegova osjetljivost nije smanjila. Ono što se smanjilo jest tolerancija na stalnu neravnotežu. Više je ne može ignorirati kada ga nešto boli. Više se ne može pretvarati da je neutralan kada se osjeća iscrpljeno. To stvara unutarnje i vanjsko trenje. Neki ljudi reagiraju na njegovu odsutnost, pitaju je li sve u redu. Drugi ne primjećuju. Svaka reakcija potvrđuje nešto što nije htio priznati. Njegova uloga je bila jasna, ali njegova suština je bila malo poznata. To boli, ali i pojašnjava stvari. Alan Watts je rekao da buđenje počinje kada prestanemo bježati od unutarnje nelagode. Empat je u toj točki. Ne zna kamo će nas to odvesti. Zna samo da se više ne može vratiti onome što je bio. Nešto se tiho, ali nepovratno slomilo. Duboko u sebi postoji veći strah od gubitka ljudi. To je strah od otkrića da je cijeli vaš život izgrađen oko uloge, koja više nema smisla. Taj strah raste kako se distancira, promatra, utihne i onda, gotovo nesvjesno, nameće se uznemirujući zaključak. Možda vaša empatija nikada nije bila problem. Možda je problem bio korištenje empatije za bijeg od sebe. Ova ideja ne donosi trenutnu utjehu, donosi vrtoglavicu. U tom trenutku nešto u njemu počinje poprimati oblik. To još nije promjena, to još nije oslobođenje. To je nagomilana napetost, sadržana energija. Nešto što ne može ostati samo odraz. Jer kada se empat povlači iz svijeta, ne bježi. On se po prvi put približava nečemu što je oduvijek izbjegavao, vlastitoj istini. Imamo cilj od 1000 pretplatnika na ovom kanalu. Pretplatite se sada i pomozite nam da ostvarimo taj cilj. Tihi kolaps empata ništa ne eksplodira. Ništa se vidljivo ne lomi. Ono što se događa je dublje i stoga uznemirujuće. Empat ne ulazi u krizu, već u stanje lucidnosti. Lucidnosti koja ne donosi trenutno olakšanje, već dekonstruira sve što se prije činilo stabilnim. Počinju shvaćati da razdvajanje nije bio izolirani događaj, već samo početak nečeg većeg, nečega što se sada kreće iznutra, bez traženja dopuštenja. Alan Watts je rekao da se pravo buđenje ne događa kada pronađemo odgovore, već kada pitanja postane nemoguće ignorirati. Empat je upravo u toj točki. Više ne može umrtviti nelagodu pretjeranim razumijevanjem, niti neutralizirati vlastitu nelagodu racionalnim opravdanjima. Nešto u njima počinje zahtijevati pažnju, ne vanjsku brigu, već unutarnju prisutnost. Počinje promatrati vlastiti s novootkrivenom znatiželjom. Primjećuje koliko su se njegove misli oduvijek vrtjele oko drugih, što drugi osjećaju, što drugima treba, što drugi očekuju. Sada, kada pokušava učiniti isto sa sobom, nailazi na otpor. Postoji čudna, gotovo neprijateljska praznina, poput neistraženog teritorija. To ga destabilizira. Tko sam ja kada emocionalno ne reagiram na svijet? Ovo pitanje se ne postavlja kao jasna fraza, već kao osjećaj. Nelagoda koja se pojavljuje kada je predugo sam. Težina na prsima kada nema nikoga tko bi mu pomogao. Tišina koja se više ne može ispuniti hitnostima drugih. Empat počinje shvaćati da je cijeli život izbjegavao ovaj susret sa samim sobom. Wattso je objasnio da se ego održava ponavljanjem. Sve dok se obrazac održava, identitet se čini čvrstim. Empat je prekinuo obrazac, iako nenamjerno. I sada, bez uloge emocionalne podrške, nešto u njemu počinje se raspadati. Ne zbog slabosti, već zbog nedostatka stare strukture. Pokušava se držati navika, rutina, distrakcija, malih bjegova, ali sve se čini previše površno. Ono što je nekada funkcioniralo sada zvuči prazno. Plitki razgovori postaju zamorni. Brze zabave gube svoj učinak. Empat shvaća da se nešto bitno aktiviralo i da se više ne može isključiti. Zašto sada? Zašto se ta nelagoda pojavila tek nakon toliko godina? To se pitanje javlja usred noći, tijekom trenutaka duge tišine. Shvaća da je osjetljivost koju je oduvijek imao sada okrenuta prema unutra. A to je neugodno, jer nema prakse u suočavanju sa samim sobom. Uvijek mu je bilo lakše nositi se s drugima. Postoji specifičan, gotovo banalan trenutak koji označava unutarnju prekretnicu. Empat čuje sebe kako govori sve je u redu kada očito nije. Fraza izlazi automatski, uvježbana, ali nešto iznutra reagira. Trenutna napetost, osjećaj unutarnje izdaje. Po prvi put shvaćaju koliko su sami sebi lagali tijekom cijelog života. Alan Watts je rekao da psihička patnja ne dolazi od boli, već od otpora istini. Empat počinje to konkretno osjećati. Što se više trudite održati staru sliku ravnoteže, sve postaje teže. Što se više trudite izgledati dobro, to se osjećate udaljenije od sebe. Počinje se prisjećati starih epizoda kroz novu prizmu. Situacija u kojima je bio obezvrijeđen, ignoriran, emocionalno manipuliran. Prije je uvijek razumio kontekst, opravdavao postupke druge osobe, umanjivao utjecaj. Sada ta sjećanja poprimaju drugačiji ton. Ne stvaraju mržnju, već jasnoću. Jasnoću koja boli. Jesam li mogao pomiješati empatiju s emocionalnom podložnošću? Na ovo pitanje ne dolazi odmah odgovor. Dolazi s stezanjem u prsima. Empat shvaća da je mnogo puta ostao u situacijama koje su ga povrijedile, samo kako bi izbjegao neugodnost. Zamijenio je autentičnost za prihvaćanje. I to sada uzima svoj danak. Tijelo reagira intenzivnije. Empat osjeća tjeskobu, bez ikakvog vidljivog razloga. Nervozu koja se javlja kada trebaju zauzeti stav. Gotovo dječji strah od razočaranja. Shvaćaju da je njihov emocionalni sustav obučen, da izbjegava sukob pod svaku cijenu. I sada, svaki znak unutarnjeg sukoba stvara napetost. Wattso je rekao da se urušava kada pokušava održati nekompatibilne identitete. Empat doživljava taj kolaps. Više ne može biti isti kao prije, ali još ne zna tko će biti nakon toga. Visi između dva stanja, a taj međuprostor je neugodan, nestabilan i usamljen. Počinje primjećivati nešto neobično. Kad se distancira, neki odnosi brzo slabe, drugi postaju neugodni. Ljudi ne znaju kako se nositi s njim izvan njegove uobičajene uloge. To stvara vanjsku tišinu koja zrcali unutarnju tišinu. I u tom zrcaljenju izranja istina koju je teško prihvatiti. Koliko me ljudi poznaje izvan moje emocionalne uloge. Ova spoznaja ne dolazi s ljutnjom, već s lucidnom tugom. Empat shvaća da je predugo bio više doživljavan kao resurs nego kao osoba. I dopustio je to, ne zbog nedostatka vrijednosti, već zbog pretjerane prilagodbe. Alan Wattso je rekao da se buđenje često osjeća kao raspad. Empat osjeća upravo to. Nema prosvjetljenja, nema euforije. Postoji zbunjenost, postoji tuga. Tuga zbog slike koju su izgradili o sebi. Zbog ideje da bi, ako ste dovoljno dobri, dovoljno razumljivi, sve bilo u redu. Počinje se pitati nije li njegova empatija dijelom bila sofisticirani oblik kontrole. Ne kontrola nad drugom osobom, već nad vlastitom nesigurnošću. Brigom je izbjegavao osjećaje. Razumijevanjem je izbjegavao suočavanje. Podržavanjem je izbjegavao pad. Ta ga ideja plaši. Što ako bih koristio empatiju kako bih izbjegao gledanje sebe? Ovo pitanje slama nešto unutarnje. Empat osjeća mješavinu srama i olakšanja. Srama što shvaćaju da su zanemarili sebe. Olakšanje što su to konačno vidjeli. Počinju shvaćati da problem nije bila njihova osjetljivost, već način na koji su je koristili protiv sebe. Napetost sada ne leži u onome što će se dogoditi vani, već u onome što će se dogoditi unutra. Nešto se počinje tiho organizirati. To nije svjesna odluka, to nije plan. To je rastući unutarnji pritisak, kao da nešto staro gubi stisak. Empat shvaća da se više ne može pretvarati. Više ne može automatski reći da. Više se ne može smiješiti kada ga nešto boli. Ta nemogućnost nije slabost, to je pukotina. Pukotina koja se još nije manifestirala izvana, ali je već promijenila sve iznutra. Wattso je rekao da kada se lažni ja počne raspadati, paniči jer vjeruje da umire. Empat suptilno osjeća tu paniku. Difuzni strah od gubitka onoga što jesu. Strah od toga da postanu netko neprepoznatljiv. Ali istovremeno postoji čudan osjećaj iskrenosti. Počinje shvaćati da možda nikada nije živio punim plućima. Uvijek posredovan drugima. Uvijek filtriran. Uvijek prilagođen. Sada nešto zahtijeva integraciju. Zahtijeva da osjeća bez opravdavanja, da prizna bez omekšavanja, da postoji bez prilagođavanja. I upravo u tom trenutku, gotovo na granici podnošljivog, javlja se neočekivana spoznaja. Ne kao razrađena misao, već kao unutarnja sigurnost. Možda najveći slom koji doživljava nije gubitak, već kraj identiteta koji nikada nije bio istinski njegov. Ova spoznaja ne donosi trenutni mir, donosi tišinu. Gustu, tešku, nepovratnu tišinu. Empat razumije, čak i bez riječi, da nema povratka u prethodno stanje. Nešto je definitivno slomljeno i po prvi put ne pokušava to popraviti. On jednostavno ostaje. Konačna integracija. Kada se empat vrati sebi, nema bljeska uvida. Nema iznenadnog otkrića koje sve reorganizira kao magijom. Ono što se događa je suptilnije. I upravo zbog toga stvarnije. Nakon tihog sloma, nakon pada lika, empat ulazi na teritorij koji nikada nije naučen nastanjivati. Teritorij integracije. To nije neposredna sreća. To je prisutnost. Sirova, nesavršena, ali stvarna prisutnost. Alan Wattso je rekao da ljudska patnja počinje kada pokušavamo biti dosljedni slici umjesto iskreni s iskustvom. Empat sada više ne može održati staru dosljednost. Ne želi se vratiti onome što je bio, ali također ne zna točno tko postaje. I to ga po prvi put ne paralizira. Samo ga poziva da hoda s pažnjom. Postoji tiha tuga koju treba prevladati. Tuga za verzijom sebe, koja je vjerovala da je ljubav stalan napor. Ta briga je značila iscrpljenost. Ta empatija je zahtijevala kontinuiranu žrtvu. Ova tuga nije dramatična, ali je duboka. Pojavljuje se u malim gestama. Izgovaranje ne prvi put bez opravdanja, uočavanje praznog prostora tamo gdje je nekada bila hitnost, shvaćanje da se neki ljudi distanciraju kada se prestanemo prilagođavati. Ova odvojenost boli, ali i uči. Uči da nije svaka veza bila veza. Mnoge su bile samo emocionalne ovisnosti prikrivene kao bliskost. Empat počinje shvaćati da očuvanje sebe ne znači odbacivanje drugoga, već prekidanje ciklusa samozanemarivanja. To razumijevanje ne dolazi kao teorija, već kao svakodnevna praksa. Prava transformacija počinje kada odluči primijeniti, na konkretan način, ono što je interno naučio, ne kao kruti plan, već kao živu predanost samom sebi. Prvi korak je jednostavan, ali izazovan. Promatrati prije reagiranja. Empat uči percipirati automatski impuls za brigom, rješavanjem, upijanjem. Umjesto da djeluje odmah, on zastaje. Diše. Pita se je li to izbor ili navika. Ovaj mali interval stvara prostor između podražaja i reakcije. U tom prostoru nastaje mogućnost svjesnosti. Alan Wattso je rekao da sloboda ne leži u kontroli impulsa, već u njegovom jasnom viđenju. Empat počinje vidjeti. I nakon što vidi, više nije talac. Drugi korak je ponovno izgraditi odnos s vlastitim tijelom i vlastitim granicama. Empat je obučen da ignorira fizičke i emocionalne signale. Sada počinju slušati. Umor prestaje biti slabost i postaje informacija. Iritacija prestaje biti krivnja i postaje znak upozorenja. Tuga prestaje biti nešto što treba ispraviti i postaje nešto što treba prihvatiti. Ovo unutarnje slušanje zahtijeva svakodnevnu praksu. Zahtijeva svjesnu tišinu. Trenuke kada nije ispunjena tuđim problemima, niti stalnim ometanjima. Jednostavno ostaje. U početku to stvara nelagodu, zatim stvara jasnoću. Počinje prepoznavati što istinski osjeća, a ne ono što je naučio osjećati kako bi održao vanjsku ravnotežu. Treći korak je redefinirati empatiju kao svjesnu prisutnost, a ne kao emocionalnu fuziju. Empat uči da razumijevanje drugoga ne zahtijeva nošenje tuđeg tereta, da voljeti ne zahtijeva gubitak sebe, da pomaganje ne zahtijeva samo uništenje. Ova redefinicija mijenja način na koji se odnose. Počinju slušati bez preuzimanja odgovornosti za ishod, nuditi bez iscrpljivanja, biti prisutan bez nestajanja. To stvara vanjske sukobe. Neki ljudi pružaju otpor, drugi testiraju svoje granice. Empat se boji održati svoju poziciju, ali nešto u njima sada ih održava. Shvaćaju da svaka poštovana granica jača njihov integritet, a svaka granica prekršena u ime krivnje slabi ovaj novi temelj koji se gradi. Četvrti korak je zdravo integriranje samoće. Empat se oduvijek bojao samoće, jer je samoću povezivao s napuštanjem. Sada samoću počinje doživljavati kao prostor za unutarnju reorganizaciju. Uči biti sa sobom bez osuđivanja sebe, bez previše zahtjeva od sebe, bez stalnog ispravljanja sebe. Taj prostor postaje unutarnji laboratorij u kojem prepoznaje želje, frustracije i želje koje nikada nisu imale glas. Wattso je rekao da integrirana osoba nije ona koja eliminira proturječnosti, već ona koja ih uspijeva obuzdati bez da postane fragmentirana. Empat počinje živjeti tu integraciju. Osjeća empatiju i istovremeno postavlja granice. Voli i istovremeno čuva sebe. Brine se i istovremeno poštuje sebe. To ga ne čini hladnim, čini ga cjelovitim. Peti korak je djelovati na način koji je usklađen, čak i kada to stvara nelagodu. Empat uči da transformacija bez djelovanja postaje puko intelektualno razumijevanje. Počinju prilagođavati rutine, odnose i prioritete. Male dosljedne akcije zamjenjuju velika emocionalna obećanja. Bolje biraju gdje ulažu svoju energiju. Uče napustiti iscrpljujuća okruženja. Uče ostati tamo gdje postoji istinska razmjena. Ovaj proces nije linearan, postoje recidivi. Postoje dani kada se stari obrazac pokušava vratiti, ali sada postoji svjesnost, a svjesnost mijenja igru. Empat ne kažnjava sebe kada pogriješi. On promatra, uči i vraća se na pravi put. Ovo samo suosjećanje je temeljni dio integracije. Najiznenađujuće je ono što se s vremenom počinje pojavljivati. Zreliji tip empatije, manje dramatičan, lucidniji, manje reaktivan, stabilniji. Empat shvaća da prestankom žrtvovanja sebe, njegova prisutnost postaje iskrenija. Oni ne nude spasenje, već svjesno društvo, a to mijenja kvalitetu odnosa koji ostaju. Alan Wattso nas je podsjetio da ljudska bića nisu došla na svijet da bi se ispravila, već da bi se u potpunosti izrazila. Empat počinje živjeti na taj način. Više ne pokušava biti idealan, pokušava biti iskren, a ta iskrenost stvara mir koji ne ovisi o vanjskom odobravanju. Osvrćući se unatrag, shvaća da tiha bol nije bila pogreška, bio je to znak. Poziv na povratak sebi. Slom nije bio uništenje, već dekondicioniranje, a integracija nije krajnja točka, već način hodanja. Međutim, gotovo na kraju ovog procesa dolazi do još jedne spoznaje. Nešto što potpuno mijenja način na koji shvaća sve što je doživio. Shvaća da nije izliječen od pretjerane empatije. Jednostavno je prestao boriti se protiv nje. Potpunim prihvaćanjem onoga što jest, bez korištenja toga kao krutog identiteta, postaje slobodan. Slobodan osjećati, slobodan birati, slobodan stati. I ta sloboda nije bučna. Ona je tiha, čvrsta i nepovratna. Ako vam se ovaj sadržaj svidio i pomogao razjasniti nešto što vas je zbunjivalo, pretplatite se na kanal, lajkajte ovaj video i podijelite svoja pitanja ili osobna iskustva u komentarima. Ako želite, možete to učiniti anonimno. Vaše sudjelovanje pomaže da ovaj prostor nastavi postojati i dosegne više ljudi koji također prolaze kroz ovaj proces unutarnje transformacije.
Most of us live as though time were a straight line, stretching from the distant past through the fleeting present into the unknown future. We are taught to imagine ourselves as travelers along this line, beginning with birth, moving through childhood, adulthood, and finally ending at death. And because we see it this way, we spend much of our lives trying to get somewhere else. We long to reach the next point on the line, the promotion, the relationship, the success, the retirement, as if the meaning of our existence always lies just ahead. But what if this picture is entirely wrong? What if time is not a line at all, but a trick of perception, a useful convention that we mistake for reality? What if the past and the future are not places we can ever truly visit, but rather ideas, shadows, abstractions that exist only in thought? Consider the past. You may remember it vividly. The warmth of your childhood home, the smell of your grandmother's cooking, the sound of laughter echoing in a familiar room. But where is that now? You cannot hold it, you cannot touch it. It exists only as a memory, a trace in the present mind. And the future, the great destination we are all hurrying toward, is even more elusive. It has never arrived. And when it does, it is no longer the future. It is simply another present moment, just as ordinary, just as immediate as this one. So the only reality you ever truly know is the present. And yet, how rarely do we inhabit it? Instead, we live in stories about the past and fantasies about the future, carrying regrets and anxieties like heavy luggage on a journey that never leaves the station. Time, then, is not so much a thing, but a way of thinking. It is a lens through which we view change, a measurement we impose on the flow of experience. The clock ticks, the calendar flips, and we believe we are moving forward, step by step. But in truth, the movement is not in time. The movement is in ourselves. The present moment is eternal. It never began, and it will never end. What changes is our attention, our awareness, shifting like the beam of a flashlight over the vast field of now. If you look carefully, you will notice that you never experience time itself. You experience only sensations, thoughts, emotions, each one arising and fading within this moment. You do not live in yesterday or tomorrow. You live only here. Yesterday is a thought now. Tomorrow is a thought now. Even the idea of now is a thought happening now. To say time is an illusion is not to say that clocks are useless or that schedules do not function. It is to say that the reality we imagine time to be a great river carrying us along is not what we actually experience. What we experience is more like music. A melody does not exist all at once, as notes on a page. It exists in the playing, in the sounding of one note after another. And yet, the meaning of the melody is never in one note alone, but in the relationship between them. Likewise, life is not a series of isolated moments, but a flowing rhythm. And in that rhythm, the only place you ever stand is the present. But we resist this truth because we are addicted to becoming. We want to be something more than what we are now. We say, one day I'll be happy, one day I'll arrive. And in chasing that arrival, we miss the only arrival there has ever been. For when you look closely, you see that there is no traveler and no line of time. There is only the eternal unfolding of this very moment. Think of it like a wave in the ocean. You might say the wave begins here and ends there. But in reality, the wave is not a thing separate from the ocean, it is the ocean waving. In the same way, what you call your life in time is simply the universe presenting itself. There is no separate you moving through time. There is only the eternal dance of being, taking this shape and then that, rising and falling, just as waves rise and fall in the sea. And if this is so, then death itself is not the end of time, because there was never a personal timeline to begin with. Death is simply another change of form within the eternal now. What you are, in truth, is not bound by the calendar or the clock. You are the present awareness in which all of these things appear. When you see this clearly, an extraordinary freedom opens. For if there is no past holding you and no future binding you, then what is there to fear? What is there to regret? Every burden you carry is only a thought, a story, a memory. And every hope you chase is only a dream, a fantasy, an expectation. None of it has ever been realer than the sensations in your body, the sound of my voice, the beating of your heart right now. And so the invitation is simple. Awaken to this present, not as a stepping stone to somewhere else, but as the very essence of life. For the illusion of time is that it tempts us to live everywhere but here. And the truth of life is that here is all there has ever been. We live in a culture that worships the clock. Our days are chopped into hours, our hours into minutes, our minutes into seconds. We rise when the alarm rings, we eat by the schedule, we work by the calendar, and when the evening comes, we collapse into bed to prepare for another cycle. Life becomes a timetable, a program to be run. And so we mistake the measure for the thing measured. We believe that time is real because we have become servants of the instruments designed to track it. But tell me, have you ever touched a minute? Have you ever seen an hour lying on the street? These are not realities. They are symbols, abstractions, agreements we made with one another to coordinate our lives, and yet we live as though they were masters, as though they held power over our very being. This creates a peculiar anxiety, because if time is real, then it is always running out. Each tick of the clock becomes a step toward loss, loss of youth, loss of opportunity, loss of life itself. We chase after time the way a dog chases its tail, never catching it, never resting. And so we speak of killing time, of wasting time, of saving time, as though time was some great treasure stored in a vault. But time cannot be saved, nor wasted, nor killed. It can only be imagined. You see, the future you are hurrying toward will never come. When it does, it will not be the future, it will be now. And the past you cling to has already dissolved, except as a thought arising here. This present moment is not something moving along a line, like a bead sliding on a string. It is the whole string itself, appearing as a bead for a moment, then another, and another, yet never leaving the fullness of being. The more you chase after what is not here, the more you miss the wonder, that island. It is like standing in the middle of a garden, surrounded by flowers in bloom, and yet staring at your watch, waiting for the right moment to look up. The flowers do not wait, they open now. But perhaps the greatest trick of time is the way it builds the illusion of a separate self. For we imagine ourselves as entities with a beginning in the past and an ending in the future, stretched like a thread across the loom of time. We say, I was born then, and I will die then. But look closely. You never experienced your birth. You will never experience your death. You know only this moment, and in this moment, you are not a fixed identity. You are an ever-changing pattern of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions, none of which remain for more than a fleeting instant. So, who then are you? You are not the child you once were, for that child exists only in memory. You are not the elder you imagine becoming, for that image exists only in fantasy. You are not even the you of a moment ago, for that thought has already vanished. You are, in truth, the awareness in which all of these forms appear and disappear. You are the timeless witness of time's illusion. When this realization dawns, a curious thing happens. Life ceases to feel like a journey with a destination and begins to feel like music being played. You no longer listen to the symphony in order to reach the final note, for the value is in the unfolding of the melody. You no longer dance to arrive at some final step, for the joy is in the movement itself. And so you see that existence is not a race to be won, but a song to be sung, a dance to be danced, endlessly, without purpose other than itself. To live without being bound by time is not to abandon all plans or calendars. It is simply to remember that these are conveniences, not truths. You may still make an appointment, but you no longer mistake the appointment for life itself. You may still mark a birthday, but you no longer believe you are merely the number of years measured. For you know that what you truly are is beyond all measurement, beyond all counting. You are the timeless presence in which time appears. And when you live from this recognition, something profound shifts. The anxiety of running out, the fear of missing out, the constant hunger for the next moment, all of this softens. You begin to see that you have never left this moment, and you never will. Eternity is not a long stretch of endless time. Eternity is the absence of time. Eternity is now. So do not wait for the future to give you what you already possess. Do not cling to the past as though it could return. Look instead at what is here. Feel the breath as it enters and leaves. Hear the sounds as they arise and fall. Notice the thoughts as they flicker and vanish. All of it is happening in the only place it could, this eternal present. And once you see this, time becomes play. You can wear a watch, you can follow a schedule, you can meet a deadline, but you do it lightly, knowing it is all part of the dance. For beneath it all, the truth is unchanged. There is no past, there is no future, there is only the miracle of now. And in that miracle, you are free. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the faint hum of a melody you have heard before but cannot quite place. One morning you wake and something feels different. The life you have been living suddenly appears unfamiliar, as though you have been following a script written by someone else. You look around and realize that every decision, every belief, every desire that has shaped your days may not have been born from your own depths, but from the silent influences of others. Parents, teachers, friends, society, they all handed you fragments of identity, pieces of what they believed you should be, and over time, you built yourself out of their expectations. And so begins the quiet tragedy of almost every human being. We are taught how to fit in long before we are taught how to be free. We learn the art of pleasing, of performing, of living according to what is rewarded and avoiding what is punished. The strange part is that this happens so subtly that we rarely notice it. We come to believe that the person we have become is the person we truly are. But deep within, a faint whisper continues to call out, reminding us that something essential has been forgotten. When you are young, you are open, spontaneous, unguarded. You laugh for no reason. You cry without shame. You explore without fear. But slowly, you are told which parts of yourself are acceptable and which must be hidden. You are told to stop dreaming so big, to be practical, to stop being so sensitive, to stop asking why. Each correction, each reprimand is like another brick placed upon the wall between you and your true nature. To survive, you learn to hide. To be loved, you learn to pretend. This pretending becomes second nature. You create a version of yourself that feels safe enough to be accepted by others. You wear it like a mask, a face designed for the world. Carl Jung called it the persona. It is useful, even necessary, for navigating society. It allows you to function, to communicate, to belong. But the danger lies in forgetting that it is only a mask. Because when you identify too deeply with the persona, you begin to lose touch with what is real underneath. You start living to maintain the illusion rather than to discover the truth. Yet beneath every mask lies another world, vast and untamed. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the part of ourselves we keep locked away. It contains everything we were told not to be, everything we feared would make us unlovable. Our anger, our jealousy, our shame, our secret desires, our fragility. We like to imagine that these things vanish when we repress them, but they do not. They remain alive and active in the dark corners of the psyche, shaping our behavior in ways we do not see. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the part of you that demands to be seen, not judged but understood. Consider how often you find yourself irritated by another person's behavior, angered by their arrogance or selfishness. What if I told you that these reactions often reveal not the flaws of others, but the disowned parts of yourself? Jung said that what we dislike most in others is usually a reflection of what we cannot accept in ourselves. In this way, life becomes a mirror, endlessly showing us the parts of our being that long for reintegration. To find yourself is to face this mirror without flinching. It is to look into the depths of your own contradiction and see not a monster, but a human being. We all contain light and shadow, love and fear, generosity and selfishness. These are not opposites to be defeated, but energies to be harmonized. For if you reject half of yourself, how can you ever be whole? The journey of awakening does not begin by becoming perfect. It begins by becoming honest. When you begin to turn inward, the noise of the world grows loud. Distractions multiply. You notice how easily you reach for your phone, how quickly you fill silence with activity, how uncomfortable you feel when left alone with your thoughts. This is not coincidence, it is resistance. For the moment you stop running, the buried voices begin to rise. They speak of the dreams you abandoned, the parts of yourself you silenced, the emotions you refused to feel, and they ask you, quietly but persistently, who are you really? This question cannot be answered with words, for words belong to the mind, and the mind knows only labels. The self that you are seeking is not something that can be described or contained. It is not your name, your story, your profession, or even your personality. These are only costumes worn by something infinitely larger. What you truly are is what remains when the costumes fall away. The awareness that watches the play of life unfold. The tragedy is that most people spend their lives mistaking the mask for the actor. They believe that their thoughts define them, that their history confines them, that their fears predict them. But who is it that sees the thoughts? Who is it that observes the story? If you close your eyes and turn attention inward, you may sense it, the silent witness beneath all experience, untouched by pleasure or pain, success or failure. That witness is the true self, and it has been waiting patiently for you to notice. Finding yourself is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering what you have always been. The self is not discovered through effort, but revealed through surrender. You do not dig for it like treasure. You allow it to emerge by removing what hides it. And what hides it most is fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen as you are. But these fears are illusions. They arise only because we have mistaken our temporary identity for the truth of our being. When you realize that you are not your image, not your achievements, not your reputation, then fear begins to dissolve. Still, the journey inward is not easy. It requires immense courage to face what you have denied, to look at your own darkness without condemnation, to forgive yourself for the times you betrayed your own soul, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing who you are. But this is the sacred task of every human being, for only through confronting your inner divisions can you become whole again. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of the conscious and the unconscious, the reconciliation of all that you are. It is not the path of becoming good in the moral sense, but of becoming real. It is to allow the entire spectrum of your humanity to exist without denial. When the shadow is brought into awareness, it no longer controls you from the dark. When the persona is seen for what it is, it no longer imprisons you in performance. In this freedom, something miraculous begins to happen. You begin to feel alive again. Not the shallow excitement of external pleasure, but the quiet joy of authenticity. You stop living to impress and start living to express. You stop chasing approval and start following your inner rhythm. You no longer measure your worth by comparison because you realize that you were never in competition with anyone. Life ceases to be a test and becomes a dance. And perhaps this is what it truly means to find yourself, to discover that the self was never lost, only obscured by layers of conditioning. The real you was there all along, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the endless search to be enough. To find yourself is not to travel to distant lands or to collect spiritual experiences. It is simply to stop running away from what you already are. When you finally begin to listen to that quiet presence within you, life changes in subtle but profound ways. You start noticing synchronicities, little coincidences that seem to whisper that you are on the right path. You feel a gentle harmony between your inner and outer worlds. The same world that once felt hostile or indifferent begins to mirror your own awakening. For as you become more real, reality itself becomes more alive. It is here, in this stillness, that life truly begins, not when you have perfected yourself, not when you have found all the answers, but when you have finally stopped pretending. The beginning of awakening is not a grand revelation, but a quiet return, a remembering of something ancient and familiar. You realize that you were never separate, never incomplete, never broken. You were only asleep in the dream of becoming someone else. To wake from that dream is to be reborn, to see yourself not as a role being played, but as the consciousness that animates all roles. And in that realization, the endless striving falls away. What remains is peace, not the peace of escape, but the peace of truth. And perhaps that is where we can say, gently and without hurry, that life does not begin when you achieve something, or when you fix yourself, or when the world finally understands you. Life begins when you find yourself, when you stop searching for meaning in things and people, and realize that meaning has always been the nature of your being. There comes a time when the search for yourself begins to feel less like a journey outward and more like a quiet unfolding inward. You start to notice that every experience, pleasant or painful, was never random. Each one was shaping you, revealing another layer of who you are, beneath the noise of who you were told to be. The heartbreaks that once broke you now appear as moments of awakening. The failures that shamed you now seem like sacred detours. The endless striving to be someone else begins to feel heavy, unnecessary, almost absurd. Because what you have been searching for has always been here, hidden beneath the effort to find it. To find yourself is not to arrive at a fixed destination. It is to return again and again to the living awareness that is already present within you. You are not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The deeper you go, the less you find answers, and the more you find presence. Because the real self cannot be defined by words, only experienced in the stillness between them. When you are truly yourself, there is no image to maintain, no role to perform, no distance between what you feel and what you express. There is only being. Carl Jung described this as individuation, but it is something far more ancient than any theory. It is the same process spoken of by sages across time, the awakening of the soul to its own completeness. When you stop identifying with the mask, when you cease resisting the shadow, when you allow both the light and darkness to coexist within you without judgment, something extraordinary happens. You begin to sense a harmony, a rhythm, as though the entire universe is breathing with you. You realize that your life was never a mistake, that every path, even the crooked ones, was leading you back home, The mind resists this truth because it wants control. It prefers clear answers, solid definitions, boundaries between what is good and bad, right and wrong, self and other. But reality does not operate in such simple lines. Life is fluid, dynamic, paradoxical. You cannot find yourself by clinging to one side of the equation. You must embrace the whole. The mind wants to label the shadow as evil, but the shadow often carries your greatest wisdom. It holds the raw energy of passion, creativity, and courage that you once buried. When you learn to meet it with love instead of fear, that energy transforms. It no longer sabotages your life, it enriches it. Imagine standing before a vast mirror that reflects not just your surface, but every hidden aspect of your being. At first, you resist what you see, the imperfections, the contradictions, the desires you wish you didn't have. But as you continue to look, the resistance softens. You begin to see beauty even in the brokenness. You begin to see innocence in the mistakes, lessons in the pain. And somewhere in that acceptance, something shifts. You no longer feel the need to become someone else. You start to feel a quiet reverence for the person you already are. This is the birth of wholeness. It is not perfection, but inclusion. To be whole is to allow everything within you to belong. Every fear, every dream, every wound, every joy. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is exiled. You begin to realize that what you once called your flaws were simply unloved parts of yourself asking to come home. When you stop fighting them, they reveal their hidden gifts. Anger becomes strength. Sadness becomes compassion. Fear becomes awareness. In this transformation, life begins to move through you effortlessly, without resistance. Many people believe awakening means escaping the world, withdrawing into isolation, rising above the noise of daily life. But the truth is the opposite. To awaken is to enter life fully, to see the sacred in the ordinary, to meet each moment as it is. When you are yourself, the world ceases to be an obstacle. It becomes a mirror of your inner state. You begin to notice that the people who challenge you the most are also your greatest teachers. They reveal where you are still clinging, where you are still afraid to love. In this sense, every encounter becomes part of your awakening. It is not the search for peace that brings peace, but the end of resistance to what is. You find freedom not by controlling life, but by allowing it to unfold. When you stop trying to become something other than what you are, the illusion of separation dissolves. You begin to see that the self and life are not two different things. They are the same flow, the same current moving through form and formlessness alike. The trees, the clouds, the laughter of strangers, the stillness between your thoughts, all of it is you, appearing in countless shapes. The ego fears this realization because it thrives on separation. It says, I am this, and in saying so, it limits what you can be. But when you begin to see through the ego, not as an enemy but as a temporary tool, you discover something vast. You realize that awareness itself, the consciousness that observes, feels, and experiences, has no boundaries. It has no age, no gender, no identity. It is infinite, timeless, untouched. The more you rest in that awareness, the lighter everything becomes. You begin to live, not from fear, but from flow. You begin to act, not from need, but from fullness. The mind wants to fix itself, to improve itself endlessly. It chases healing, transformation, enlightenment, as if they were things to be achieved. But what if there is nothing to fix? What if the real healing happens not by doing, but by being? When you stop trying to become whole and simply rest in the wholeness that already exists within you, something miraculous occurs. The tension dissolves. The struggle ends. Life begins to move through you naturally, like a river finding its way to the sea. Every day offers you an opportunity to remember this truth. Each time you pause, breathe, and simply allow yourself to exist without judgment, you are touching your true nature. It does not demand grand revelations or spiritual rituals. It reveals itself in the quiet moments, the stillness of early morning, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the deep breath that softens your chest. The truth is not hidden in some distant philosophy. It is here, in the simplicity of being alive. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To find yourself, then, is to wake up from the trance of unconscious living. It is to see that the patterns that once ruled you were never stronger than your awareness of them. The moment you see them clearly, their power dissolves. Awareness is the light that frees you from the prison of repetition. When you begin to live from awareness, your sense of identity expands. You no longer see yourself as a small being struggling in a vast universe. You see yourself as the universe experiencing itself through a particular form. The boundaries between inner and outer, self and other, begin to blur. You realize that every encounter, every emotion, every experience is part of the same dance. The same consciousness that moves the stars moves you. And so, the great paradox of finding yourself is that it leads to the realization that there was never a separate self to begin with. What you truly are is not confined to a body or a story. You are the space in which all stories arise and dissolve. You are the awareness in which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear. The self you have been seeking is not something to acquire. It is the seeing itself. When you understand this, you stop searching. You begin to live. Life begins the moment you stop trying to fix the past or control the future. It begins when you allow this moment, exactly as it is, to be enough. When you rest in that simple presence, the weight of becoming falls away. You realize that you were never incomplete, never broken, never lost. You were simply asleep to your own depth. And now you are awake. Life does not begin when you become someone new. It begins when you remember who you are, the timeless awareness behind all change. To find yourself is to see through the illusion of separation and to realize that you have always been home. And from that place of quiet knowing, you begin to live not as a seeker, but as the song itself. There are moments in life that seem to shimmer differently from all the others. You meet someone, and for reasons that defy logic, the air between you feels charged with something ancient. The conversation flows as if it has always been happening. The silences are full instead of awkward, and their presence feels less like discovery and more like remembrance. You can't quite explain it, but you know it. You know them, though you have never met. It isn't about attraction in the usual sense. It isn't even about similarity. It's something deeper, quieter, a kind of recognition that bypasses thought. You feel it in the way your body relaxes around them, the way your mind stops performing. In their gaze, you don't feel judged, but seen, not admired, but known. Most people mistake this feeling for romance, for destiny, for the long-awaited other half. But what you are really experiencing is the universe recognizing itself through two of its expressions. When two awakened souls meet, what passes between them is not ownership, but awareness. You see, awakening strips away the masks that most people wear. It dissolves the stories we tell ourselves about who we should be and how others should perceive us. And when those stories are gone, what's left is naked, being simple, luminous consciousness. So when two beings who are awake to that truth meet, they see not personas, but presence. The illusion of separation flickers and, for a moment, disappears. It's not that you fall in love, it's that love falls into you. Awakened connection is not built through effort. It happens by resonance. Just as two tuning forks vibrate together when one is struck, two beings who are attuned to life's depth naturally harmonize. They don't complete each other, they reveal each other. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see what is already whole. The ego doesn't know what to do with this kind of meeting. It tries to name it, to contain it, to turn it into a narrative. It calls it fate or twin flame or cosmic purpose. But the truth is simpler and more mysterious than that. When you stand before another and feel that inexplicable recognition, you are witnessing consciousness remembering itself. There's a story I like to tell. A wave once looked across the ocean and saw another wave approaching. "You look familiar," it said. "Perhaps we've met before." The other wave laughed and said, "Of course we have. We've never been apart." That is what happens when two awakened souls meet. They see through the forms and remember the sea. At first, the experience can feel overwhelming. You may feel a rush of emotion, a sense of intensity that your mind can't label. That's because awareness, when reflected, amplifies itself. The presence of another conscious being draws forth what is dormant in you. You begin to see parts of yourself you had forgotten: tenderness, vulnerability, peace. This can be beautiful, but also unsettling. The ego fears transparency. It prefers the safety of roles and masks. When faced with someone who sees beyond them, it trembles. That trembling isn't a warning, it's a purification. It's life asking, are you willing to be seen completely? If you are, something miraculous unfolds. The boundaries soften, not in the sense of merging, but in the sense of openness. You realize that real intimacy is not about becoming one person. It's about realizing you were never two. That's the paradox of awakened connection. It deepens individuality while dissolving separation. Each person remains distinct, yet both recognize the same awareness behind the distinction. It's like two mirrors reflecting each other into infinity, endless, spacious, and free. In such presence, words become unnecessary. Conversation still happens, but it carries a different weight. Silence speaks louder than language. The need to impress fades. You start to listen, not to reply, but to hear the universe speaking through both of you. There's no desire to hold or keep the other, because what you value isn't their form, but their being. You see that even if the body's part, the awareness you share is continuous. That's why these connections, once experienced, never truly end. The people may move away, the story may change, but the recognition remains imprinted in consciousness. And so you begin to understand that what the universe brings together, it doesn't always keep together in form. It doesn't promise permanence, only truth. The purpose of meeting an awakened soul is not to possess them, but to remember who you are through them. When you grasp that, the anxiety of attachment dissolves. You no longer need to define the relationship, to protect it, to make it fit an image. You let it be what it is, a sacred intersection in the vast unfolding of being. Sometimes that intersection lasts a lifetime. Sometimes it lasts a moment. But in eternity, the length doesn't matter. 1 second of true recognition outweighs years of polite familiarity. And even if you never meet again, the meeting has already fulfilled its purpose. It has shown you the face of awareness in another form. It has reminded you that love, in its highest expression, is not about merging or clinging. It's about seeing clearly and allowing freely. You begin to notice that this recognition can happen anywhere, with a stranger on a train, a child, an animal, even a fleeting encounter that leaves no trace. It's the same universe winking at itself, saying, I'm still here. In that realization, loneliness dissolves. You see that the awakened soul is not a rare being hidden somewhere in the world. Every person is that soul, sleeping or stirring, waiting for the right moment to open their eyes. And when they do, the meeting happens again, not between two people, but within the vastness that contains them both. When awareness meets awareness, something changes in the air. You can feel it, even if you can't explain it. There's a softness, as though time slows down just enough for eternity to peek through. You stop thinking about who you are supposed to be and simply exist as you are. It's not dramatic. It's not mystical fireworks. It's more like coming home to a place you never knew you'd left. And that homecoming doesn't depend on the other person. They may have sparked it, but what they really did was remind you of yourself. You begin to see that all love, in its deepest sense, is self-recognition. Not the small self that worries and strives, but the vast awareness that has always been quietly watching. When you love someone who is awake, you're really loving the presence that both of you share. This kind of meeting doesn't follow the usual human script. There are no guarantees, no promises to fulfill, no expectations to satisfy. You don't meet to complete each other, you meet to reflect each other. The relationship, whatever form it takes, becomes a sacred mirror. You start to see where you still cling, where you still hide, where you still confuse attachment for love. Sometimes that reflection can be uncomfortable. The other person may stir up parts of you that you thought were resolved. That's because awareness, by its nature, illuminates. When two awakened souls meet, every shadow is invited to surface, not for judgment, but for integration. It's like two candles placed near each other. Their flames grow brighter, and the darkness has no choice but to retreat. And yet, in that brightness, there is gentleness. True recognition doesn't demand, it doesn't need to control or claim, it simply allows. You can feel the difference. Possession feels heavy, while awareness feels weightless. When you look into the eyes of someone who truly sees you, there's no hunger in their gaze. There's space, the kind of space that lets you breathe freely, that invites you to be exactly as you are. You start to understand why the universe arranges such meetings. It's not to give you a perfect companion or to fix your loneliness. It's to remind you of the unity behind all appearances. Through the reflection of another, you remember that everything you seek has always been within you. That realization is both humbling and liberating. Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The world starts to glow differently. Every encounter becomes an echo of that recognition. You begin to sense the sacred in everyone, even those who are still asleep to their own light. You look at them and think, ah, there you are, just not awake yet. And you realize how patient the universe really is. It allows every soul to awaken in its own time, through its own experiences. Some awaken through beauty, some through heartbreak, some through silence. But the destination is always the same, the rediscovery of being. When you understand that, love ceases to be personal, it expands. You no longer love people for who they are to you. You love them for what they are in truth, expressions of the same consciousness wearing different masks. The boundaries blur, and compassion becomes effortless. You stop needing to be understood, and instead, you start to understand. That's the strange and beautiful thing about awakening. It doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary, but in the most miraculous way. You no longer stand apart from the world. You blend with it. You taste the oneness that mystics and poets have always tried to describe. And yet, you can still enjoy the play of individuality. You still laugh, cry, fall in love, and lose things. You still feel the human heartbeat, but now it pulses in rhythm with everything else. When you meet another awakened soul, that rhythm harmonizes for a while, like two notes in perfect tune, and when they part, the song continues in a different key. It's not about holding on, it's about listening. Listening to the music of connection without demanding it play forever. Some meetings are a single verse, others are an entire symphony. Both are complete, both are sacred. The universe has a peculiar way of arranging such encounters. You don't plan them, you don't predict them, and you certainly don't control them. They happen in the same way that flowers bloom or waves rise spontaneously, without permission. And just as naturally, they fade when the time is right. If you can accept that rhythm, you'll never feel abandoned. You'll understand that the universe doesn't take people away, it changes the form of the connection. The awareness you share remains untouched, like light passing through different windows. The glass changes, the light does not. And so, when two awakened souls meet, there's no need to grasp, no need to mourn, no need to define. You simply recognize the miracle, bow to it, and let it flow. That recognition is enough to transform your whole understanding of relationship. You see, that awakening isn't just a solitary journey, it's relational. Every meeting, every reflection, every exchange of energy is part of the unfolding. And through these reflections, awareness deepens its understanding of itself. Even separation in this light becomes sacred, because the moment you stop clinging, you start to perceive the subtle thread that connects all things. You realize that love never leaves, it only changes its language. So when you meet someone and feel that quiet recognition, don't rush to label it. Don't trap it in words like soulmate or destiny. Just be still and let it reveal its lesson. The universe is using that person as a mirror to show you your own depth. And when the reflection fades, thank it, bow to it, because it has done what it came to do, to remind you that awareness is never alone. That's the secret. The universe doesn't bring two awakened souls together to make them one. It brings them together so they can see that they always were. There is a quiet humor in the way the universe arranges things. It hides itself in countless forms, pretending not to know what it is. And then, every so often, two of those forms look at each other and remember. That remembrance is not dramatic. It's subtle, like sunlight finally reaching a corner of the room that's been in shadow all morning. You don't say, "Ah, the light has come." You simply notice that everything looks clearer. When two awakened souls meet, that clarity deepens. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see the movement of awareness itself. The mirror does not add anything, it only reflects what is already there. But in the reflection, the mystery becomes visible. You begin to sense that what you call me and what you call you are two ripples on the same sea, two ways the universe is tasting its own existence. The mind resists this at first. It likes definitions. It wants to say, you are over there and I am over here, and our connection must mean something specific. But awareness smiles at the mind's confusion. It knows that what appears as two is actually one, playing hide and seek. The very act of seeking each other is how consciousness enjoys its own diversity. Think of a mirror facing another mirror. Between them, reflections multiply into infinity. No single image can claim to be the original, yet each one contains the same light. When you look into the eyes of another awakened being, you are seeing that infinity, an endless play of forms, revealing the same source. This realization changes the flavor of love. It becomes less like hunger and more like recognition. You don't reach out to take, you relax into seeing. Love stops being an effort and turns into awareness resting in itself. You no longer say, I love you as possession, but as observation. I see the same light moving there. And when you see that light clearly, judgment dissolves. The need to compare, to demand, to shape others into your image fades. How could you insist that another wave be higher or lower than yours when you both rise from the same ocean? Compassion becomes natural, not as a moral virtue, but as a direct understanding. The suffering of another is no longer foreign. It is your own reflection asking to be understood. Awakened relationship, then, is not about agreement or shared beliefs. It's about shared seeing. You could disagree entirely on politics, taste, or temperament, yet still feel the deep resonance that comes from recognizing the same ground of being. Beneath all the movement of personality, there is a stillness you both inhabit. When you rest there together, even silence becomes a conversation. That silence teaches you something that words cannot. Presence is enough. You realize that most of your interactions in life were attempts to fill silence because silence felt empty. But when awareness meets awareness, silence feels full. You could sit beside each other for hours, saying nothing, and still feel complete. It's as though time pauses to listen. People often ask, how do I find someone awakened? But that very question hides the answer. You cannot find awareness outside yourself. You can only recognize it. And recognition happens naturally when you're no longer seeking completion. When you stop demanding the world to fill your emptiness, you discover that everyone you meet becomes a potential reflection. The awakened companion may not appear as you imagine. They might be a stranger on a bus, a child, a teacher, or even a brief passerby. But the essence of the meeting is always the same: awareness glimpsing itself. Such meetings are gifts, not possessions. They are reminders, and like all reminders, they vanish once their purpose is fulfilled. To cling to them is to lose the lesson they carried. The universe will sometimes bring someone into your life only long enough for you to remember what you already are. When that memory settles, the person may drift away, and that is not a loss, it's a completion. Of course, the heart still aches when form departs. Even the awakened heart feels grief. But awareness transforms grief into gratitude. You begin to thank existence for lending you another mirror, even for a moment. You see that love is never wasted, because love was never between two. It was the movement of the one appearing as two. And so, the mirror of awareness does its work quietly. It shows you where you are still hiding. It reveals the subtle clinging to identity, the small fears that whisper, I must hold on. But when you look closely, you see that even those fears are part of the dance. The mirror reflects everything, not only light but shadow, because both belong to wholeness. There will be times when another awakened soul challenges you, not through argument, but through presence. Their stillness might unsettle you. Their acceptance might disarm you. That is the mirror at work. Awareness is showing you the places where you still contract, where you still resist being seen. Let those reflections soften you instead of frighten you. The more completely you allow yourself to be seen, the freer you become. Over time, you notice that the need for particular mirrors fades. You no longer wait for the universe to bring you someone special because you've discovered that the mirror was never external. The world itself becomes your companion. Every sound, every face, every gust of wind reflects the same consciousness back to you. Life becomes an ongoing conversation between the infinite and itself. And in that realization, the old idea of loneliness loses its grip. You may live alone, you may walk through a crowded city, but you are never isolated. The same awareness that once met you through another now meets you through everything. The raindrop on the window, the laughter of a stranger, the breath moving in your chest, all of it whispers the same message. I am here, I am you, I have always been. When you live from that space, relationships transform. You don't enter them out of need, but out of joy. You meet others not to complete yourself, but to celebrate the shared being that already is complete. You can love fully without fear, because you know that even if form changes, the essence remains untouched. The mirror cannot break. It can only change what it reflects. This understanding also brings humility. You realize that awakening doesn't make you better than anyone else. It simply makes you transparent. You become a clear window through which life shines unobstructed. And when another soul looks through that window, they might recognize their own clarity. In that sense, awakening is contagious not because you teach it, but because you are it. Sometimes the universe arranges two such transparent beings to cross paths for a while. Their presence amplifies each other, creating a small field of peace that ripples outward. You can feel this when you're near them, a calm that doesn't need explanation. They don't preach, they simply exist, and their existence changes the atmosphere. But the universe is playful. It doesn't allow stagnation, even in enlightenment. Eventually, those paths diverge again. The mirrors move apart, and each continues, reflecting the infinite in new ways. And that, too, is perfect. When you understand this, you stop asking, will it last? Because you see that it already has. Every true meeting is eternal in its essence. The form may dissolve, but the awareness that recognized itself through that meeting never fades. In dreams, in memory, in subtle intuition, the resonance continues. It's the universe reminding you, nothing real can be lost. So, what happens when the universe brings two awakened souls together? Nothing and everything. On the surface, perhaps two people share a conversation, a walk, a moment of laughter. Beneath the surface, the infinite meets itself and smiles. The smile is enough. You might not even realize until later that something inside you shifted. The world feels lighter, your heart more spacious, your mind less defensive. That is how the mirror works quietly, without drama. It doesn't change what you are, it reveals it. And once revealed, you can never return to pretending. You may forget for a time, you may get caught again in stories and striving, but somewhere inside, the remembrance remains. Every future meeting, every glimpse of beauty, will echo that first recognition, I am the one I was seeking. Eventually, you stop distinguishing between spiritual and ordinary encounters. The sacred seeps into everything. The cashier's smile, the rhythm of rain, the breath between thoughts, all mirrors, all teachers. The universe never stopped bringing awareness together. You just stopped noticing. Now you see that the entire cosmos is an endless conversation between awakened souls, each reflecting the same light through different eyes. So, when another comes into your life and you feel that spark of familiarity, treat it as a blessing, not a mission. Don't rush to label it. Don't demand that it stay. Simply bow inwardly and say, ah, there you are again. Then let life decide how long the dance will last. Because the meeting itself is the message. To see yourself reflected so clearly, even for an instant, is to remember eternity. And in that remembrance, all seeking ends. You realize that there were never two awakened souls, only one awareness, meeting itself in infinite forms, smiling through countless eyes. There are moments, sometimes quiet, sometimes aching, when one looks over the shoulder of time and wonders what it was all for. You wake up one day and realize that years have passed, and somehow the grand story you thought you were writing seems to have slipped through your fingers. Perhaps you did everything you were told you should do. You worked hard, you stayed busy, you followed the path that others laid before you. Yet still, there is this haunting whisper that asks, was this it? It can be a very strange and lonely feeling, this sense that you have wasted something as sacred as your own life. Because you see, we are all taught that life is something to be used, something to be directed toward a purpose, something that must amount to something in the end. And so we chase after the idea of meaning like a man chasing his own shadow. But the more you run after it, the further it seems to recede. This idea of waste only appears when we measure life by a story we believe it should have followed. You were supposed to be somewhere by now. You were supposed to have done something, become someone, proven something. And yet here you are, standing still, looking at the world and feeling as if everyone else is moving ahead while you are being quietly left behind. But the strange thing about that feeling is that it never quite tells the truth. Because what if what you call wasting your life is only your life refusing to be wasted on the wrong things? What if your stillness is not failure, but rest? What if the roads you didn't take were simply the ones that were never yours to walk? You see, we live in a world obsessed with progress. Everything around us is designed to convince you that you must constantly be moving towards something, producing something, improving something, achieving something. But in that endless striving, you forget how to be. You forget that the meaning of life is not found at the end of a path, but in the simple act of walking. The oak tree does not rush to grow. The clouds do not hurry across the sky to arrive at a destination. And yet, we are convinced that stillness means stagnation, that silence means absence, that not knowing means failure. The idea that you have wasted your life is built on a comparison. You look at what others have done, what they have achieved, where they are, and then you measure your own existence against their imagined success. But comparison is a trick of the mind. It turns life into a contest, when in truth it was never a race at all. You are not running toward meaning, you are meaning unfolding. Consider this. If a flower were to bloom at midnight, hidden from every eye, would it still be beautiful? Would its fragrance be any less sweet because no one saw it? The flower does not bloom to be seen. It blooms because blooming is its nature. In the same way, your life does not need to be seen, measured, or admired to be worthwhile. You exist because the universe willed it so. And that, by itself, is enough. The feeling that life has been wasted often arises when the story you told yourself about who you were supposed to become begins to fall apart. But every story must dissolve for truth to appear. There comes a moment when the masks grow heavy, when the ambitions no longer excite you, when the old dreams start to feel like clothes that no longer fit. And that moment, though it feels like despair, is actually the beginning of something miraculous. It is the unraveling of illusion. For so long you believed you were on your way to somewhere, but where exactly? You were never truly going anywhere, because you were never truly separate from the place you longed to reach. You are already there. The journey was never about arriving. It was about realizing that you had been home all along. Many people come to this realization late in life, sometimes after decades of striving. They wake up one morning, see the lines on their face, the gray in their hair, and they think, what was it all for? They look at the possessions, the status, the roles they played, and none of it feels real anymore. And that can be a terrifying moment, but it can also be the first true breath of freedom you have ever taken. Because when you no longer believe you must become someone else to be worthy, you begin to live. Let me tell you a small story. There was once a monk who spent his entire life searching for enlightenment. He meditated for years, fasted, studied sacred texts, and traveled from teacher to teacher. Yet peace always seemed to elude him. One day, exhausted and old, he gave up. He sat beneath a tree and said to himself, I have wasted my life. But as he sat there, a gentle breeze passed through the leaves, and he noticed the sound of the wind, the sunlight flickering through the branches, the simple stillness of the world. In that moment, he began to laugh, because he realized that all along, he had been searching for something that had never been lost. The same is true for you. You cannot waste your life any more than you can waste the sky. You may delay awareness, but the totality of life remains untouched by your choices. Even the mistakes, even the regrets, are part of the great unfolding. Nothing is outside of it. Nothing is wasted. You see, your idea of waste depends on your idea of time. You imagine a line, a past behind you and a future ahead, and you judge where you stand along that line. But time is not a line. It is a dance. The past is not gone. It is alive in you now as memory, as experience, as the invisible current shaping this very moment. The future is not waiting. It is already being born through your thoughts, your breath, your presence. And this moment, this one right now, is eternity disguised as now. So when you say, I have wasted my life, what you are really saying is, I have not noticed that life has always been here, because it has. It never went anywhere. Regret is the mind's way of trying to rewrite a story that was never yours to control. It is an echo of resistance, a refusal to accept the perfection of imperfection. But the moment you stop arguing with your past, the moment you allow every mistake to simply be part of the fabric of what made you, a quiet peace begins to emerge. That peace is not indifference. It is understanding. Perhaps you feel you spent too long in the wrong job, or loved the wrong person, or chased dreams that dissolved into dust. But what if none of that was wrong? What if each step, each heartbreak, each detour was essential in leading you to this very awareness? Life, after all, is not a straight path. It spirals, it loops, it doubles back, it confuses you on purpose so that you may eventually see the futility of trying to control it. And once you see that, a beautiful thing happens. You stop trying to win life. You begin to live it. The great error of modern man is that he measures his worth in productivity. You are not a machine. You are a mystery. You are not meant to function efficiently. You are meant to experience deeply. You are meant to feel the full weight of being alive, the joy, the loss, the uncertainty, the beauty, the grief. Every part of it is sacred. If you could only step back and see your life not as a series of failures or missed opportunities, but as a single piece of art, a painting in progress, you would realize that even the dark strokes are necessary for the light to shine. The contrast is what gives the picture depth. Perhaps you cannot see it now, but someday you will. You will look back and see that nothing was wasted. Every wrong turn led you home. Every heartbreak opened your heart a little wider. Every delay prepared you for what could not be rushed. The truth is that life cannot be wasted, because life is not a possession. You cannot lose what you never owned. You can only forget that it was never yours to control. So, if you feel you have wasted your life, I invite you to look closer. Look at the way the light falls on your hands. Look at the breath moving through your chest. Look at the small, miraculous act of awareness that allows you to even ask this question. This moment, right here, is your life, and it is whole. When you truly see that, something within you softens. The tension of regret begins to dissolve, and in its place comes a deep, unshakable peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of recognition. Because the truth is, you were never off track. There is no track. There is only this infinite unfolding, and you are part of it, now and forever. That is where healing begins. That is where the illusion of waste ends. When you begin to sense that perhaps nothing was wasted, the mind doesn't easily surrender its habit of measuring. It will try to find a new way to evaluate, a quieter scale upon which to weigh the worth of your days. It might whisper, all right, perhaps I didn't waste my life, but surely I should be further along by now. You see, even when you stop running, the mind still wants a finish line. But there isn't one. The idea of a finish line is born from the illusion that life is a journey from ignorance to enlightenment, from brokenness to wholeness, from lostness to foundness. But there was never such a line to cross. You were never incomplete. You were never missing anything. What you call growth, what you call progress, is simply the unfolding recognition of what has always been true. Yet the human being as it is, craves story. It needs to feel that it is going somewhere. That need gives us hope in dark hours, but it also creates a subtle prison. For as long as you believe there is somewhere you must arrive, you cannot rest here. You are always just a little bit away from home. So much of our suffering comes not from the past itself, but from our attempts to rewrite it. We imagine the alternate lives we could have lived, the choices we should have made, the people we might have been if only the cards had fallen differently. But these imagined lives are ghosts. They shimmer just beyond the reach of what's real. And every time you compare your actual life to those ghosts, you dishonor the sacredness of what actually is. You were never meant to be the best version of yourself. You were meant to be the only version of yourself. The perfection you seek is not in some ideal self-image, it's in the depth of the one that already lives and breathes within you. The truth is that the feeling of having wasted your life is an invitation, not a condemnation. It is a quiet knocking from the soul, asking to be seen, asking you to stop chasing, to stop proving, to stop trying so hard to be something. The exhaustion that follows years of striving is not evidence of failure. It is the body and spirit calling you home. And coming home to yourself can feel strange at first, almost unsettling, because the person you built in your mind, the one who was supposed to be accomplished, admired, certain, and strong, begins to crumble. What remains is someone far simpler, softer, more real, someone who does not need to pretend. There is a tenderness in that breaking, like the moment you realize the wave has always been the ocean. The separation was only imagined. And with that realization comes a strange, liberating humility. You begin to see that even your mistakes were not really yours. They were movements of the universe through the particular form you call me. Now, imagine standing on the shore of your own life. Behind you, the waves of memory crash and dissolve. Before you, the horizon stretches endlessly. You could spend your whole life staring backward, watching the ripples of what has been, or you could simply turn and face the open sea. Both choices are available, neither is wrong. But one keeps you bound to what has passed. The other invites you into the mystery that has always been waiting. This moment right now is not the sum of your past, nor the promise of your future. It is life in its purest form, unadorned, unmeasured, and utterly free. The trouble is that we rarely allow it to be enough. We clutter the present with demands for meaning, for validation, for proof that it matters. But meaning, my friend, is not something you give to life. It is what life gives to you when you stop asking it to explain itself. Look at the simple act of breathing. You inhale, and without effort, the universe enters you. You exhale, and you give yourself back to it. That rhythm has been happening your entire life, unnoticed, uncelebrated, perfectly balanced. You do not ask each breath what purpose it serves. You simply breathe. And yet, each breath sustains the miracle of your being. That is how life works. Meaning emerges not from what you do to it, but from what you allow it to show you. When you loosen your grip on the idea that your life must justify itself, something beautiful happens. The ordinary begins to shimmer. You notice the way sunlight falls on your table, the sound of distant laughter, the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that this unremarkable, unplanned, unspectacular moment is the essence of living. The modern world, however, does not reward this awareness. It worships noise. It values ambition over stillness, productivity over presence, attention over understanding. You are constantly being pulled away from yourself, told that you should be somewhere else, doing something else, becoming someone else. But the truth is that every time you abandon the present to chase a future, you deepen the illusion of waste. You create a gap where none exists. This is why so many people grow restless, even when they appear successful, because deep down, the soul cannot be satisfied with applause. It only longs for truth. And truth, unlike success, cannot be achieved. It can only be seen. When you begin to live with this seeing, your relationship to time begins to change. You stop asking, how much time do I have left? And start realizing that you are time. You are the eternal now, unfolding as this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. Life is not moving through you. You are life moving. The past, then, is not a weight to carry. It is a teacher. The mistakes you think ruined, you were actually sculpting you. The losses you grieve were making space for something new to arise. You thought you were being broken. You were being rearranged. You see, the universe wastes nothing. Not a leaf that falls, not a tear that drops, not a single heartbeat. Everything is used, everything transformed. You are part of that alchemy. So how could you have wasted your life when life itself wastes nothing? Sometimes the path seems meaningless only because you're standing too close to it. Like a painting, its beauty can only be seen when you take a few steps back. You must allow the years to settle, to merge, to reveal their hidden symmetry. Only then do you begin to see the pattern. Only then does the chaos make sense. And as you begin to see that pattern, gratitude quietly replaces regret. You realize that the very moments you despised, the loneliness, the failure, the confusion, were the ones that softened your heart. They broke the shell of who you thought you should be so that something vast and tender could shine through. So, you see, you did not waste your life. You were preparing to live it. And this living has nothing to do with success or legacy. It is about seeing the sacred in the simple, the way water moves, the way your hands age, the way a small kindness lingers long after it's given. These things, though small, are the pulse of eternity. But you must learn to stay with the moment, to stay with yourself, to stay with life even when it offers no grand answers. Because when you stay, you begin to notice that the feeling of emptiness was never emptiness at all, it was spaciousness. It was room for you to finally arrive. Now, some will ask, but what about purpose? Don't we all need one? And yes, in a way, purpose gives us direction, but direction is not the same as destination. Purpose is not something you find, it is something you express through being. The tree does not need a purpose to grow, its growing is its purpose. The bird does not need a reason to sing, its singing is its being, and so it is with you. Perhaps your greatest purpose is not to achieve anything at all, but to embody awareness so fully that life can experience itself through you. That may not sound grand, but it is divine. If you can see that even one day of your life, one seemingly wasted, uneventful, ordinary day was actually filled with this quiet divine presence, then the idea of waste collapses. Because what you were calling wasted time was actually eternity playing dress up as delay. And if you can understand that, not just intellectually but inwardly, then a great peace will find you. Not the peace of resignation, but the peace of realization, the peace of knowing that you have never been outside of life's embrace. Everything that has ever happened, every failure, every detour, every regret was part of the unfolding of this awareness. It could not have been otherwise. When you truly see that, the ache of I have wasted my life begins to dissolve into a quiet smile, because you realize that the story you were mourning was never real to begin with. It was only a dream of who you thought you should have been. And awakening, after all, is nothing more than realizing that the dreamer was never separate from the dream. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you begin to understand that your life does not need to be different in order to be whole. It is a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. You stop asking, what should I be doing? And instead begin to listen. You start to feel that life, all along, has been whispering to you through everything you once ignored, through failure, through silence, through longing. It was never absent. You were simply too busy trying to edit the story to hear its voice. When this understanding dawns, it's not a flash of enlightenment, but more like the gradual clearing of fog. The trees of your existence, once obscured by regret and expectation, slowly come into view. You begin to see how perfectly imperfect it all was. how each stumble carved a kind of wisdom into your bones, how each disappointment softened your heart, and how even your confusion was guiding you toward clarity. This is the paradox of awakening. You find what you were seeking not by acquiring, but by relinquishing. The meaning you searched for begins to reveal itself when you stop demanding that life prove its worth. You realize that the search itself was never the problem. It was your assumption that meaning was missing that caused the ache. The feeling of having wasted your life was not the truth. It was the veil that covered it. And as that veil begins to fall, a new kind of stillness appears, not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of presence. The kind that exists between two heartbeats, in the quiet before you speak, in the way your chest rises without your asking. You notice that life doesn't need your permission to continue. It breathes you, it moves you, it carries you forward, regardless of your stories about it. You see, what most people call awakening is not the gaining of something new, but the gentle loss of what was never real. It's like waking from a long dream in which you spent years trying to find the meaning of the dream itself, only to realize that you were always safe in your bed. The dream was beautiful, tragic, complex, and rich, but it was never separate from the one who dreamt it. So too with life. You were never separate from the totality of it. Even in your loneliest, darkest hours, you were still held by the same intelligence that turns the planets and opens the flowers. You were never outside of that harmony, only asleep to it. To awaken, then, is not to rise above life, but to sink deeper into it, to see the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary, to realize that enlightenment was never a mountaintop, but the ground beneath your feet. You might look back now on all the years you thought were lost, and see that they were not lost at all. They were preparing you to see. They were the soil in which understanding could finally take root. Every regret was compost for wisdom. Every mistake was a seed of awareness waiting for the right season to bloom. And when that season arrives, you begin to move differently. Not because you found some grand new purpose, but because you are no longer fighting the rhythm of existence. Your actions become effortless, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally trust the unfolding. You realize that your life was never something to manage, it was something to experience. The illusion of waste begins to dissolve because you no longer measure time in achievements, but in presence. You begin to see that 10 minutes of genuine awareness is worth more than 10 years of unconscious striving. When this recognition takes hold, even your past pain begins to glow with a strange light. You see that what once felt unbearable was, in fact, the breaking of the shell around your being. It was how life made space for itself within you, and you begin to thank the very moments that once made you curse your existence. You bow to the storm because you see now that it wasn't against you, it was refining you. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to laugh. Not out of mockery or defiance, but from the sheer relief of seeing how unnecessary all the struggle was. You realize that life had never required your control. It only needed your attention. You had been running through open fields with a blindfold on, searching for the way out, unaware that there were no walls. You may recall the times you prayed for clarity, for purpose, for a sign, and perhaps you now see that those prayers were answered not in words, but in silence. Not through instruction, but through revelation, because clarity does not come from adding more answers. It comes from letting go of all the questions that were never yours to carry. There's an old saying that the truth sets you free, but first it makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that deep unease of not knowing what to do with your life, was the beginning of your freedom. It stripped you of false certainty, of borrowed dreams, of identities that were never truly yours. It left you naked before life itself. And that nakedness, that vulnerability, is the doorway to peace. Because when you stand without pretense, without the armor of who you think you should be, life finally meets you as you are. And that meeting is love. You begin to see that love was never something to find or to deserve, It was the quiet awareness that remained after everything else fell away. It is the gentle hum behind all experience, the soft current that carries every joy and every sorrow. When you touch that current, even briefly, you realize that nothing has ever truly been lost. For how can anything be lost in a universe that recycles itself infinitely? How can a life be wasted when each breath, each tear, each moment of longing becomes part of the great turning? You are not a fragment of the cosmos. You are the cosmos, looking at itself through the eyes of this particular human form.